Hi, everybody. I wanted to give you a quick story about clay and tell you about it a little bit since we'll be working in this material. Um, is clay Play-Doh? No. Can you eat clay? Well, you probably shouldn't. There's such a thing called French clay, which people will eat if they're fasting to bind things in your intestines so that it's a purifier. But otherwise, no, you don't want to be eating clay. Is clay made out of flour and glue and salt? No, no. Clay is rock, and clay is actually from granite. Granite, which is what these mountains are all made out of, the San Bernardino Mountains and the San Gabriel Mountains, they're all made out of decomposing granite. We actually have decomposed granite paths around campus, which if you have been to campus, you don't know that, but if you have been, they're the brown paths. You see them throughout Southern California. So anyway, granite is very ubiquitous, meaning everywhere. It makes something up like something like 3/4 of the Earth's mantle. So it's very plentiful. And clay comes from granite. Now, granite's a rock, and granite is actually, I start sharing screen here so I can start writing some stuff down here for you. I don't think you need to take notes. I'll take them for you. So anyway, we have granite. I'm gonna make my head a little bit bigger here, see if I can do that. I think I can. There we go. So granite, come on. There we go. Another name for granite is it's a feldspathic rock. Feldspathic rock. So if you get into geology, that's what they're going to call it. Now, when granite, feldspathic rock, starts to break down, it turns into a feldspar, which is like a powder. The feldspar is mined, and this is what where I get a clay from, sort of. Actually, we mine it to get the actual feldspar. I'll go into that. Now, how does granite break down? Well, there's a lot of forces at work. The main primary one is when glaciers came through North America or across the world and just leveled up mountains, just like that, and just crushed it. That breaks down granite. Earthquakes break down granite. Fire can pulverize rock some. Plants growing through rocks, the force of plants can crack rock. That's pretty amazing. Any kind of erosion breaks down rock. So lots of like flowing water and rain can break up rock. There's a dog barking that's really distracting me. I'll try to keep going. Anyway, all these different forces can break rock down into sort of more of a powder. Now, when it breaks down, there's like 3 elements of feldspar that will sort of kind of separate out as things erode. There's silica. Now, silica, you may have heard of silica sand, and silica is actually glass. So when you melt sand, which is silica, it turns into glass. So I'll put glass in here, giving you the chemical names. There's glass, and then another part of feldspar is alumina. Some people call alumina clay. That technically they call that clay, but silica, all clay has silica in it. So alumina and silica is kind of like clay. And then there's a third element of a feldspar, and that I'll say mineral. And there's 2 main minerals that can be found in feldspar: sodium. Have you heard of sodium before? Table salt. It's salt. Sodium. And the other one is potassium. And where have you heard of potassium? Well, bananas, maybe even batteries, right? A supplement for your body. So anyway, so the fun thing is when you study clay and glazes, a lot of this stuff is in your body. So these are not foreign materials. Now, there are sodium feldspars, they call them soda spars, and there are potassium feldspars called potash spars. And there are some feldspars that have both in them. Now, as clay goes further on, or feldspar goes further on through the erosion process, it washes out the mineral. Let's see if I can do this, make a fancy little line through it. Come on, where'd you go? Here we go. So that gets washed out. So we're just left with silicon alumina, and there's your clay. Now there's two kinds of clay really. There's a primary clay. Primary clay is found close to its source, close to the mother rock that it came from. So the particles tend to be larger. And so primary clay close to mother rock. And this clay, because of the large particles, it is has a very good body. It's very strong, good body. But it's not very plastic though. So if you try to play with it, it'd be like if just crumbling your hands. But it's great for bricks, but bad plasticity, not malleable. There's secondary, what would happen? FLC, there we go. Plasticity. Secondary clay is further on downstream from the mother rock, so it goes further. So as you probably guess, the particles are going to be far smaller in size and actually more varied in size too, and also have more impurities in it. So secondary clay, and it has just the opposite qualities. It's not strong at all, but it's really malleable, good plasticity. In other words, it'd be like kind of working with almost like, kind of soft butter. Wouldn't keep its shape, but it's really plastic. So to make a good clay body, you need both of these things, a primary clay and secondary clay. Now there's one other thing that we need to talk about. Clay has traditionally been used for vessels, and vessels need to be waterproof. Now, before the advent of firing, which actually starts to melt the silica in the clay body so it becomes waterproof, before the advent of hot fires, they would, coat vessels, clay vessels, with tar pitch, and also pine pitch, or pitch from trees, and that's how they made things waterproof. But then with the advent of firing, where they could, hotter temperatures, they could melt the silica. Now the only problem with melting silica is that it's highly refractory, and I'll write that word down, refractory. And that means it doesn't melt easy. It takes about, it takes about 4,000 or 5,000 degrees for silica to melt. So there's not really, there are kilns, there are ovens that can go that hot, but it requires way too much power. So what they found over centuries of, of probably mistakes and trial and error, is they found that if you combine another material to the silica, it can lower the melting point of silica. Any material that lowers the melting point of another material is called a flux. If any of you have ever worked in soldering at all, they got the little wire thing that melts. And what you do is, you put the heater up to it, but what you first do is, like around joints, if you're doing plumbing, you'll put, they call it a flux. It's like a grease that goes around the copper tubing, whatever. You put and then you melt the tin, the wire on it, and it just flows. It makes the tin melt at a lower temperature and makes it flow. So flux lowers the melting point of another material. In this case, we want to do it to silica. And that new melting point, the new melting point's called, fun term, it's called eutectic, the eutectic point. Eutectic point. That's the new melting point. Now, refractory, by the way, I wanted to talk about that just a little bit. There are companies that are, or industries that's called the refractory industry. You go to a refractory, it's a manufacturer, and they make bricks and they make things that don't melt. So they make bricks and kiln furniture and all kinds of things that can fire to a very hot temperature and will not melt. So refractory means it doesn't melt easy, and they have a whole refractory industry and refractory objects that is sold. Anyway, so in order to make this clay melt at a lower temperature so that it's more practical, we add a flux to the silica to make it melt at lower than 4,000 degrees. Now, fortunately, there's something already up in here that will lower the melting point of silica. And that would be sodium and or potassium. They both lower the melting point of silica. So in order to get a really good workable clay body, what we could do is we could just add feldspar back into the clay. So you have a primary clay, and then you have a secondary clay, and to that you would add a feldspar to lower the melting point. And then you'd have a great clay body. Now, if I wanted a high fire clay body, I'd add less feldspar. If I want a lower firing clay body, I would add more feldspar. One of the reasons, well, like if we were in a studio, one of the reasons why we wouldn't let you bring in clay from the outside is we fire at a fairly hot temperature. If you brought in a low fire clay, it would turn into soup at a high fire temperature and just ruin the whole kiln. So anyway, but you don't have to worry about that this semester, although we have clay for you to use at school and I recommend using it. So yeah, I think that does it about clay. Let me go in my, over here. See if I forgot anything. Oh, vitrification. Yeah, I'll talk about that. So let me do this again here. Where am I now? When the flux lowers the temperature of silica and the silica starts to melt, that means it starts to vitrify. Vitrify basically means the silica is melted enough to become a bit waterproof. So vitrification, by the way, once it's vitrified, the clay will no longer ever erode back into clay. You have to pulverize it into a powder to make it, and then it's called calcined. Don't worry about it, but it's glass has already been fired and pulverized back up again. Anyway, vitrification. Anyway, so this is how we make a clay body. Now, let's go back to modules here. Let me, there we go. I have a clay PDF here that you can open up, and these are all the notes I just gave you. So let's go here. Here's granite, breaks down with erosion, feldspar, silica, alumina, and a mineral. That's what a feldspar is, primary clay, secondary clays, vitrification, refractory, flux, you take your point. So we got a flux to the clay in the form of a feldspar. So basically, and this is a good point, in other words, one could say we are basically turning decomposed rock back into rock. Just as a technical term, greenware, which I use a lot, is clay that has not been fired. So, and we go through 2 firings in the ceramic process. We're only going to do 1 firing this semester, but we have a bisque firing, gets rid of all the physical chemical water, and then the glaze firing, which is a coating of glass we put over the clay, usually done at a higher firing temperature. That's the story of clay. And from here, you can go to the demo on our warm-up project. And then I would look at the warm-up project as an assignment. And that'll be due on Monday or Tuesday, depending on the class. And we should Zoom because I have a good kind of PowerPoint and lecture to go along with that. It's not really critique, but you'll see it's important. So already, that's it. Nice to talk at the screen and you. Stop share.